There's a type of intelligence that no school teaches and no test can measure. It doesn't show up on a resume. It doesn't come from reading the right books or sitting in the right classrooms. It comes from something much harder than that. It comes from surviving an environment that forced you to understand people at a depth most never need to reach. Psychologists have started calling it traumatic intelligence. And if you've never heard that term before, that's exactly why this video matters. Because trauma doesn't only wound people, in many cases, it also builds something in them. Most people who carry it don't even realize it's unusual. They think everyone sees the world the way they do. The first sign is that you feel the room before anyone speaks. You walk in and something shifts in you, a quiet alertness. You register the tension in someone's posture, a micro expression that lasts less than a second. The way someone's breathing has changed. None of this is conscious. It just happens. Research at Harvard Medical School has shown that early exposure to stress can heighten activity in the brain's right hemisphere, the region most involved in processing nonverbal and emotional cues. Your brain didn't learn this because it was curious. It learned this because, at some point in your life, reading the emotional weather of a room was how you stayed safe. The second sign is that you carry other people's feelings as if they were your own. Someone you care about tells you they're going through something difficult, and hours later you're still sitting with their pain, not thinking about it, feeling it. You absorb the emotional atmosphere of a room like a sponge absorbs water, often without realizing you're doing it. Psychologists call this hyper-empathy, and it often develops in people who grew up needing to track the emotional states of those around them very closely. You learn to feel others deeply because your environment required it. The result is a gift. You make people feel genuinely seen. But without boundaries, it becomes something else. You become a container for everyone's pain except your own. Third, when everything falls apart, something in you gets calm. This one confuses people. Crisis hits, and while others freeze or spiral, you go quiet and focused. Your thinking sharpens. Your body settles. It's as if chaos is a frequency you already know how to tune into. Researchers call this stress inoculation. When your nervous system has been exposed to high-stakes situations repeatedly, it learns to activate efficiently instead of chaotically. You're not fearless. You're familiar. The hard part is that you might feel more like yourself in a crisis than you do in peace, and that tells you something worth paying attention to. The fourth sign is that you study people the way other people study for exams. You don't just notice behavior, you decode it. You replay conversations. You track the distance between what someone says and what they actually mean. You build quiet internal models of how people operate, under joy, under pressure, under deception. Psychologist Peter Fonagy calls this mentalization, the ability to read behavior through the lens of underlying beliefs, fears, and desires. His research shows that this ability often develops with unusual depth in children who needed to make sense of unpredictable caregivers. You became a student of human nature because understanding people wasn't optional. It felt essential to your survival. And the fifth sign is that you see through performance almost instinctively. You notice when a smile doesn't reach someone's eyes. You sense when generosity comes with conditions. You feel the difference between someone who is being honest and someone who is managing an impression. This isn't cynicism, it's calibration. Your brain was trained from a young age to detect incongruence, the gap between what people show and what they actually feel. This can be lonely. It puts you slightly outside the social contracts most people operate within. But it also gives you something rare, an honesty about reality that, over time, becomes one of your greatest strengths. But these are just what others see. The next five are about what happens inside. The sixth sign is that you've built an internal world that is unusually rich. You think in layers. You carry on dialogues with yourself, construct frameworks for understanding, experience, and process things at a depth that often surprises the people around you. Psychoanalyst Donald Winnicott suggested that when the external world is unreliable, the inner world becomes the place where a person builds safety, meaning, and coherence. You created an entire architecture inside yourself because the outside wasn't stable enough to count on. Seventh, You are pulled toward meaning in a way that others don't seem to be. Small talk exhausts you. You want to know what people are really thinking. You want conversations that matter. Research on post traumatic growth suggests that people who've moved through significant hardship often come out with a reorganized sense of what's actually important. You don't chase depth because it's intellectually stimulating. You chase it because at some point, meaning was the only thing that made the pain make sense. The eighth sign is that being truly seen by another person feels complicated. You want closeness, genuinely. But vulnerability activates something in your nervous system that feels like danger. Attachment research explains this clearly. When early bonds were unpredictable, the brain learns to crave intimacy and resist it at the same time. This doesn't mean you're broken. It means your trust runs through a deeper verification system. And when someone does pass through it, the connection you form is more honest and more resilient than most people will ever experience. Ninth, you feel guilty about your own needs. You'll show up for others at 3 in the morning without hesitation. But asking for something yourself, that feels like too much, like a burden. Psychologists recognize this as the fawn response, a pattern where a person learns early that the safest strategy is to prioritize everyone else. If your needs were punished or ignored in childhood, your brain wrote a rule that still runs quietly in the background. Their needs are real, yours are negotiable. Recognizing that this guilt is not a moral truth, but a leftover reflex, that recognition is where things begin to shift. And the 10th sign, maybe the most important one, is that you carry a kind of understanding that most people don't arrive at until much later in life. You know that love and harm can come from the same person, that someone can mean well and still do damage. That strength doesn't look the way people think it does. You've sat with complexity that most people spend their lives avoiding, and something in you refused to let it be meaningless. No one should have to learn these things the way you did. But you did learn them, and the only question that matters now is what they get to be for. Not survival anymore, but the life you actually choose to build.